Internet world, thank you very much for watching my Q5 versus Q3 video. A lot of you guys said that I was a little bit more biased to a Q3, so today I'm going to do something that's a little bit more biased to a Q5. So if you're looking at buying a Q5 over a Q3, this video may help you. Alright, so we're going to start off with the most important piece, and that is the key. So let's look at both these keys and see what keys you get with the Audi Q3 versus an Audi Q5. With an Audi Q5, you get your A4, A5, A5 Sportback key, and with an Audi Q3, disappointingly, you get the old generation Audi A3 key, which has been in service for at least 12 years now. All right, so interestingly enough, this is what I found. When I looked at all the comments and I saw all the, I guess, bias towards the Q5, I thought to myself, who's writing these comments? Until I looked at the demographic and I realized it was 95% male. And then I thought to myself, who buys Q3s? And in North America, 92% of all Q3 buyers are female. So the 5% of female that are watching these videos, please comment below and give us support for the all-new Q3. All right, and now back to being Q5 biased. So we're gonna compare engine sounds on startup. Here's the Audi Q3. And here's the Audi Q5. All right, so last time I talked about measurements in the back seat and measurements in the trunk. And I'm gonna do the exact same thing, except last time I forgot to measure from the back sill to the back rear seat. So let's go inside, take a peek here at a Q5. So let's see the distance on a Q5 from the back sill all the way to the back of the driver's seat. So I'm gonna go right in the middle of the back of the driver's seat to the edge here, and I have 70 inches. So that's exactly where I normally sit in both cars. This is an Audi Q5. And I have 70 inches from the back of the driver's seat. And let's compare that with a Q3, back of the driver's seat. The speed of the tailgate going up is exactly the same in a Q5 and a Q3. So 70 inches back of the driver's seat to here, and it's 69.5 inches. So there we go. The Q5 and the Q3 are almost the same size from the back of the driver's seat to this back sill point here. When I visually look at the cars, it looks like the Q5 is bigger, and that is correct because the Q5 is a bit bulkier and sits a little bit higher, but from in length, they are almost exactly the same. All right, so the Q3 and Q5 might be almost the same length, but visually on the outside, the big differences are on the side. The Q5 is just a lot wider. It definitely has more presence on the side than a Q3. A Q3 sort of looks like a baby Q8, so yeah, it does have that presence, but this is a lot shorter and it feels a lot skinnier. Even though it is still a beefier version of the old Q3, this specific Q3 against a Q5 just looks like it has a lot more substance from the side. And one of the few things to prove that theory is rear overhang length. So if I measure from the bottom here, this is a non-S-line Q5. I have just about a foot, I'd say just about a foot from the bottom of the concrete to the back of the top of the bumper here, and I compare that on a Q3. I know this Q3 has S-line, which means it actually has lower bumpers to make it look a little bit sportier, and I have 12 inches, and here I have about 14. So that's exactly where I'm saying that the Q5 just hangs a little bit lower, so it gives it that bigger look, and the Q3 doesn't have that, so the Q3 is still skinnier, even though this has S-line. All right, so we're in an Audi Q5 now, and this seat is actually 1 inch wider than it is in a Q3. So I do get a little bit more support and a little bit more for me to pivot from left to right. So it depends on your frame, your body frame. The Q3 may feel a little bit tight, and the Q5 does have wider seats, so that might help in terms of comfort, overall comfort. I also notice how I'm sitting is slightly different. So in a Q3, I think I'm sitting a little bit more vertical. In a Q5, I'm sitting a little bit more inclined, and that's just the way my feet sit on the ground. The Q5 seems to have a little bit higher floor level, whereas the Q3 is a little bit lower, so that means it drags my feet downward, which makes me sit more in this position as opposed to in this position. So it feels like my legs are lifted a little bit higher off the ground in a Q5, so it means I'm kind of lying down a little bit more than sitting up straight. All right, so we're driving the 2019 Audi Q5 now to compare it to the Audi Q3. So in my other video, you saw me drive the Q3, and I honestly thought it's very, very close to a Q5. So now I'm in a Q5 driving it to feel the differences with the other way around, as I mentioned. Just at sitting in the car though, it does feel wider and bigger. I did measure from end to end. So width of car and sitting in it, they're both 55 inches, which is really strange because the Q3 does feel a little bit smaller. The Q5 just feels bigger, and it's probably more so to do with the height and just where the angle of the windshield is. This does feel like a bigger car even still that it's 55 inches wide. As far as driving and turning and all that stuff, this does feel like a heavier car. Well, that's because it is a heavier car. Another thing I see is the details on a Q5 are just done a little bit better. The technology's not there. Now they did add satellite maps for 2019. I also find that the Q5 is like, think about it this way, a big calculator with big buttons versus a small calculator with small buttons. Or if you take your phone and you set the text to the highest size you can possibly find, I feel like that's the difference between a Q3 and a Q5. In the Q5, everything's just bigger. The HVAC controls are bigger. The knobs to turn it are bigger. The buttons to press for the parking system are bigger. To enter addresses is bigger. Everything's bigger. So does that mean that the car is bigger? No, it just means that the font of everything is bigger. So everything's just bigger. The vents are bigger. The armrest is definitely wider. You can fit two people's elbows here and not hit each other like you're in economy at Spirit. So as far as drivability and engine response, first thing I notice is pedal feel. When I hit the gas on a Q5, I don't find it pushing back on my feet, but I feel that pushback on a Q3. It's like there's a spring in there and it's over tightened, and when I press the gas, I have to sort of hold it there, as opposed to a Q5, I can just relax my foot in that position. So for my drivers out there, you'll know what I'm talking about. So in terms of acceleration, the Q5 is definitely peppier. There's, when you're sitting in the middle of an intersection and you're trying to accelerate out from there, it's definitely more responsive in a Q5 than a Q3. A Q3 does have a little bit of lag, which some of the commenters that have driven the car have felt. But you just kind of have to know your car more so than anything else in a Q3. In a Q5, you don't have to worry about it. You just hit the gas and it goes. It's just a bit more aggressive and responsive off the line. In terms of sound, the Q5 is definitely quieter. There's no doubt. I'm doing 70 kilometers right now, so about 50 miles or 45 miles or so, and it is dead quiet. I'm not raising my voice. I'm just talking at a normal level. In a Q3, I had to talk a little bit louder. There was a bit less insulation, so the engine noise was transferring into the cabin a little bit more. Well, in a Q5, you don't feel that. It's definitely quiet. So you can tell some of the build quality features there. There's more money invested. Well, it is about $10,000 more, so that's where some of the money's gone. Some of the things that I've heard about the Q5 over the Q3 that people don't like is people don't like the dash or the iPad sitting on the Q5. Now in the Q3 it's more integrated. It's a touch screen, so the other people don't like the touch. So it really depends on your personal preference. A big one is memory seat. So memory seat should have really been put in a Q3, but it's standard in a Q5. And another thing on a Q5 that a Q3 does not have is it doesn't have garage door opener. So memory seat and garage door opener should really be in a Q3, but it's in a Q5. But it's also not that. It's also the little tiny features that they do put in a Q5 that they don't put in a Q3. One example would be the rear camera. So the rear camera, when you spray the windshield, when you put in reverse, what happens is in the back, there's a little tiny nozzle that shoots water at the back of the rear camera of a Q5. Whereas in a Q3, they've had that little nozzle, but they basically cut it and they filled it with plastic. All right, so we're gonna see what 252 horsepower feels like on a turn, foot to the ground. It's the great thing about these Quattro systems, it doesn't lose traction at all. And there is some, there's more than enough power here. So 252 horsepower is all you need in a Q5. There's no more power you need, and you do hear the engine after about 4,500 RPM. You actually do hear pretty good feedback from the motor. In terms of my throttle was good, steering was great. It's just a really easy car to drive, jump in and out through the city, and for long distance and long drives. Audi does a great job with their suspension. Hi, can I get 2 very berry hibiscus drinks? Venti, please. Venti? Yeah, and actually, you know what? I'll get a grande. No, I'll get a venti. I'll get a venti, yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 venti very berry hibiscus refreshers.
Yeah, and can I get 1 chocolate croissant, please?
Chocolate chunk cookie?
Yeah, no, not the cookie, the croissant.
Oh, a chocolate croissant?
Yes, please.
Would you like that warmed up today?
Yes, please.
Awesome. Okay, is there anything else we can do today?
No, thank you.
4207.
Great. All right, so we're at Starbucks, I'm getting a large very berry hibiscus. So it's a fruity drink basically because it's a hot day and I want something fruity. So we're gonna do something and we're gonna test out these Audi cooled cup holders. And there's only one, by the way. Audi didn't decide to give us 2 cooled cup holders. They give us 1 cooled hot and cool cup holders. So let's test them out. All right, so I got my Very Berry Hibiscus in a large or venti format here, and I'm gonna try my cooled cup holders. So I hit this button here, and it turns blue, and now this cup holder is cooled. So I'll put my drink in there, and that's it. Now let's try that in the back. Just barely, like just barely. Have you seen the back of these cup holders in a Q5? Like, might as well not put any cup holders. These things are so small. They're designed for espresso. So I guess the kids in the back can drink espresso all day while we drink our Very Berry Hibiscus in the front. So I think Audi's plan was actually the drink goes in the door, sort of, and the croissant goes right here. Perfect fit. Thanks, Audi. All right, so as we know, the Q5 is going to be changed in the future. The next generation of Q5 is going to have wireless charging, which this one does not. At some point, they are going to put the screen like the Q3, the touch screen. So as of right now, you'd have to use the touchpad here to enter an address in, whereas the Q3, it's just a glass screen. You can just write on it. So here, there's no fingerprints. There's fingerprints, but this is the future of Audi. It's all going to be touch screen. It's all going to have fingerprints, and that's just the way it is. But the Q5 is really designed, in my opinion, for a larger family. If it's just you're a single person or it's just 2 of you, the Q3 will do you plenty. If you do have a family of 4 or 3 and you want the extra space, the Q5 will definitely suit your needs better. The Q5 is just a longer term vehicle, and by that I mean you can keep a Q5 for 5 to 7 to 10 years, whereas a Q3, if your lifestyle does change, you'd probably have to upgrade into a Q5. So that's probably the main focus of shifting from a Q3 to a Q5. The Q5 definitely has less tech than a Q3 because the Q3 is new, so really depends on what your priority list of what's important to you. But the Q3 is definitely great bang for buck, and the Q5 does give you that smoothness and that extra size for a little bit more money. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. My subscriber count is climbing, and that is super exciting. So don't forget to watch the Audi Q3 versus Q5. I know this one is more biased to Q5, and the Q3 is brand new, so it's still kind of ingrained in my mind, and it really depends on what you need out of a car. So hopefully this video helped you to decide that a Q5 does have benefits over a Q3, but also the Q3 does have some benefits over a Q5. So it really depends on where you're at and what you decide to buy. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Audi Sport Mike, and comment below.